What is up? We are back. Welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot. This is Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. I am so happy to be back with you guys and sharing the joys of mock drafting. Easily one of my favorite things to do with fantasy football, especially in these absolutely dead months from now till the draft and then the start of the football season. But enough about me. If you're new to the show, we are going to be going through a lot of different mock drafts types. For this specific episode, it's going to be a dynasty mock draft. With me every week is going to be my co-host, Austin Amandolia. Austin, you joined me halfway through the season last year for this show, and you're back again. Austin, how are you? Introduce yourself to the folks.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad to be here. Doing great today. Yeah, Austin Amandolia at Austin_FFL on Twitter. And mock drafts, man, they get me going. I've become so much better of a drafter over the past year just from doing this show, and I love it. And, Dynasty is not my skill necessarily, but hey, I'm here to learn from the best.
There you go. Well, and you bring up an interesting point before I introduce our guest, who is the best. You bring up an interesting point about how much better you've gotten. I feel the same way because I start to see trends in ADP so much better now by drafting with all these folks. And we always have a really full draft room. We always have a really active draft room, and I'll be introducing everybody to the draft room here in a second. But you do just feel like practice makes perfect, which is the whole point of this show. And I've even included that in my tagline. So you're going to hear it again at the end of the show. But our guest this week, we are starting this show with a dynasty mock draft. And just recently, our founder, Josh Hudson, has named Joel Wirth the head of our dynasty content team at Club Fantasy. So who else was I going to have on the show? One, Joel, introduce yourself. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thanks for the kind words. My name is Joel Wirth, the Joel Wirth at the Joel Wirth on Twitter. That's about the extent of my socials, but we're going to be starting up another dynasty show on Club Fantasy. It's going to be called the Dynasty After Party with myself, Michael Sicoli, Andrew Elmquist. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be something you can use if you're just getting into Dynasty. And also we're going to be talking a lot of Dynasty theory. So if you're someone who's already into Dynasty, maybe you can learn something. And if you're new to Dynasty, you can get into it and get accelerated hopefully much faster than I did. Let's say that. So,
and Joel, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Been into it for a long time. There's a lot of ropes you got to learn. So
I was going to say, we're just happy to have you here. Joel is in Northeast Ohio right now with a lot of, I guess it's wind just knocking everybody's power out. And Joel was out for days and gets his power back just in time to join us. So Joel, we hope everybody's safe and going well there, and we hope everything works out, but we're glad to have you on the show. If you guys watched any of the shows last year, Joel was a constant in every single draft, especially the dynasty drafts. Joel, you have a very different strategy to everyone else, but we're going to get into strategy here in just a few moments. This is a dynasty startup. I want to let you guys know Club Fantasy does a weekly show every Wednesday, no pun intended. And just this past Wednesday, we did our annual dynasty kickoff show where we kind of explained how the basics of dynasty football. And we had Joel on the show, and we had his soon-to-be co-host Michael Sicoli with myself and Joe Zolo. So I urge you to go back and watch that show. I think you're going to find a lot of really good tips, and hopefully you find a lot of really good tips here. So I am not going to delay any more. We are going to go ahead and get the draft up on the screen. So as you can see, we are doing a 10-team draft. This draft is going to be Superflex, 0.5 PPR. The main thing about Superflex is you're going to see quarterbacks go much earlier because they're much more important, but we're going to get to that in just a second after I go ahead and start the draft. So Austin, you are up. I'm very happy to see that you are the first pick, so we don't have to worry about our first pick timing out. I am clicking start draft. If you guys do not have your notifications and sound off, I ask you to turn your notifications and sound off because as you can see, I'm doing it right now because it will sometimes come through and we don't want to hear it. So I am clicking start draft. Austin, you are going to get us started. So Joel, let's talk a little bit about Superflex. So for folks who've never played in Superflex, I guess let's just start there. Joel, go ahead and explain Superflex and explain how it changes the draft strategy for fantasy football.
So Superflex, at its very essence, means you can play a quarterback in one of your flex spots. Obviously, quarterbacks are generally the highest scorers and the most consistent scorers, especially the elite ones. So it very much kind of almost forces you to not be able to ignore quarterbacks. And in redraft, you can kind of you can do the streaming thing, like you mentioned on Wednesday. You can kind of go with a mid-tier quarterback and just kind of hope you can get yourself through and increase your scoring at other positions. But in Superflex, that doesn't really work. You've got to have a focus. You've got to have decent quarterbacks if you want to compete consistently, especially in Dynasty, where you're going to fall behind if you're not up with the quarterbacks.
Yeah. Austin, I think Joel kind of hit it on the head where, there are people like me who love to play the streaming game during the season, but in Superflex, especially in Superflex Dynasty, that kind of gets taken away from you before it ever becomes an option.
Yeah, it's pretty wild how many quarterbacks you'll see on rosters in the Dynasty Superflex League. Like y'all know in our Club Dynasty League, I have like 6 quarterbacks on my roster right now. And part of the reason is because my starting quarterbacks were awful until I traded for Justin Fields this offseason. And it's just there's not the ability to stream. Like, you're waiting basically for someone to get injured or someone to lose their starting role to be able to pick up a quarterback off the waivers. So you've got to find your quarterback to anchor your team right away.
And we have a lot of really good drafters. We have some folks I've never seen before, but we have a lot of folks from the Club Fantasy team. I'm going to highlight our number 10 drafter. That is Kevin Coleman. Kevin is one of the Dynasty gurus for my cohorts over at Football Guys. If you guys are not following Kevin, his Twitter handle is actually the same as his sleeper handle, so make sure you're following him as well. We do already have some rabble rousers in the chat. We have our co-host Joe Zolo, who wants to know why we have not drafted Desmond Ridder yet and is pulling out our strength. Josh knows Joel's draft strategy. We're going to get to that here in just a little bit, but he is not big about a QB early. I mean, I know Josh is big about QB early. He's just giving us an absolute hard time. Before we get into the draft, I'm going to let the draft play out a little bit, but just before we go live, there was news, and there happened to be QB news, and that is that Lamar Jackson has officially requested a trade. That did not stop Kevin from taking him at 110 in this draft. So Joel, what are your thoughts on what's going on with Lamar Jackson? And I guess I want you both to kind of say, how are you handling Lamar Jackson in fantasy football if he's not traded? Because clearly we're running into what seems to be an impasse between him and the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, I think ultimately everything Lamar related has to be viewed through the lens of, whether it's overt collusion or just individual collective collusion through the ownership. They really do not want guaranteed contracts to become the norm. I think there's kind of a misconception around that about, guaranteeing the money. That I don't think that's really the problem, because most, high-end quarterbacks are going to have a lot of guaranteed money in their contracts. The problem for most of these owners is you have to put that money into escrow, right? All the guaranteed money has to go into escrow. So if you are a low, income team, or a team that has a lot of other costs, like say the Raiders, who have, just had to pay a significant fee to move to Las Vegas, you may not have that cash to be able to put into escrow. So I think that's an issue that a lot of owners don't want to get into. They obviously don't want guaranteed contracts to become the norm. So I don't think the trade, the request for a trade really moves the needle at all on Lamar. I think, he was going to have trouble finding a trade partner, especially given the cost it's going to take. So I think this is news that's really non-news. I don't think it really moves anything.
That's such an interesting point, because that's kind of what I thought as well, because when the Ravens did the non-exclusive franchise tag, wasn't that them requesting a Lamar Jackson trade? Like, it sounds to me like they said, hey, 2 1s and he's yours. So let's just throw that out there. Austin, before I have you chime in on Lamar Jackson, that's such a great point you bring up, Joel, about the escrow money. And I got to be honest, I've been an NFL fan for years, and I actually didn't know that myself. A buddy of mine is a huge Bengals fan, Dan Metzger. We'll have him on the show later this year. And he was explaining to me that the Bengals are waiting to do Joe Burrow's contract to some arbitrary date, because then they don't have to have the money in escrow until next year. And so it's all about saving that bank account. And it's very interesting, like these millionaire problems that none of us are ever going to have, but we got to wait till we can put, $75 million in escrow to sign our franchise quarterback. Like, what a ridiculous problem to have. But Austin, does Joel's take on Lamar Jackson align with your own?
Yeah. I mean, He's a 26-year-old former unanimous MVP. Like, how do you can't get much better than that unless you're going after Patrick Mahomes. And then obviously the choice is obvious at that point. So Lamar Jackson, and me, it doesn't change his fantasy stock at all. I think, he's an elite quarterback. The biggest issue he has had is health. And I think one of the interesting narratives in all of this that has kind of skated under the radar is that the NFLPA gave their grades of different teams during the offseason. And the Ravens scored awful in terms of their physical conditioning staff. They were the worst scored team by the NFLPA. And they went out of their way to point out how bad the conditioning staff was for players. And then former Baltimore Ravens players came out on Twitter saying, yeah, this staff ruined my career. And so there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of layers to this, but I think that's one element of it is maybe he just needs a better conditioning staff that can help him stay healthy over a 17-game +3 season.
Yeah, and we've seen that with many Baltimore players throughout the year. Let's talk specifically about their running backs last year as well. It was musical chairs at running back seemingly every single week. So that's a really fun point. Josh is in the chat and brings up that they're actually talking about removing that escrow clause. So let's, these millionaires already have it. These billionaires already have it tough enough. Let's solve some of their problems for them. Guys, let's look at the draft a little bit because Joel, I put you on the spot on Wednesday and asked you in a Superflex draft, when is it time to pivot from quarterback? And we talked about the 6, 7, 8 range. And in this draft specifically, it was the 6 range. So our draft starts off 5 quarterbacks deep, the exact 5 quarterbacks you expect. Really, I don't think there's a single surprise here. And honestly, I think you can go through the list. I don't think there's really been a surprise at quarterback with the exception of maybe one. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Joel, 2 picks after you take Justin Herbert. Mr. Meeseeks takes Justin Jefferson ahead of Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson. How do we feel? Is Justin Jefferson, first and foremost, the universal, this is the guy you're taking if you don't go quarterback? And is 6 the right time to start considering someone other than other than a quarterback?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think he is the most valuable non-quarterback in Dynasty. So in single quarterback leagues, I think he will be pretty much the consensus number 1 overall pick. So I think it's reasonable if that's the way you want to go. I would have, Lawrence, Fields, Jackson ahead of him personally, but I think after Burrow is kind of with the consensus cutoff of the guys you're, super safe with. Obviously, Lawrence is still young. He's only had 1 elite year. We're not sure about Fields on the passing. There's a lot going on with Lamar. So it's fair to question those guys. So I don't think that's an egregious, and especially you got to consider a 10-team league versus a 12-team league. It's a very different kind of dynamic, and the quarterback options you're going to have coming back are much better. Dak Prescott went after his second pick. Kyler Murray went after his second pick. Deshaun Watson went after his second pick. Plus the rookies. So I think that's a reasonable pick there.
Austin, so Joel kind of made it clear on Wednesday and even in this show that he was going to start off QB. You put yourself at the 101, which obviously then means you have the 20th pick coming back on the back end. Did you kind of have an idea that quarterbacks were going to dry up about that point and you kind of knew this was the strategy you were going to look for? Obviously, we're going to talk more about your strategy as the show goes, but it was that kind of the thinking in your draft slot.
Yeah, I expect if you're at the first slot in a Dynasty startup, you're guaranteed to get an elite quarterback, but you're probably not going to get a second one unless you're reaching, which being on the end, that's the space to be reaching for quarterbacks. But after that kind of first and second tier fall off, there's not a quarterback that I feel comfortable reaching on until some later rounds.
Josh is jumping ahead in the chat. Josh, we're going to get to that. Don't worry about that, but that's not where we are on the show at this point. So, again, just to kind of summarize, in Superflex, you are looking QB early, but the further you get away in the second round, that's when you're going to start looking for value picks. There is an aspect to Dynasty startups that is, as much as I love mock drafting, and for, I guess I didn't really do the show justice in the intro that this show is about making everybody better at fantasy football, about having fun with fantasy football, and about the joy that mock drafting can bring. Our good friends, the Fantasy Whisperers, have been doing Mock Draft Monday for years, and we asked if we could kind of join and help out with Mock Draft Monday because we have such a great time when we do it with them. And so we want to just like do that ourselves as well. So we stole their idea, and I'm going to say we made it better because I'm here, but I love those guys. It's all good. But way more importantly, the show is about making everyone better and talking draft strategy. But one thing you cannot do in a Dynasty mock that I feel like if you've never done Dynasty before, you need to be aware of, and that is the trading of draft picks. And it might even have been you too, Joel. You had just put a big trade in that you had done in a startup that you guys are in together, and it might have been you two that traded with each other. I told the story before we started, and I'm going to share it again. I have been playing fantasy football in some form for longer than some people have been alive. I've been playing since late 1990s, basically, before the internet. I've been playing fantasy football. I just started getting into Dynasty about 5-6 years ago. And the only time I find myself questioning myself in Dynasty, because I play to win, I have no problem buying older players. I trade draft picks away. I am 100%, Les Need or whatever at the Rams. Fuck them picks. That is me all day, every day. However, in startup drafts, this is the most long-winded question I've ever asked. In startup drafts, you are able to trade your startup picks. And those are the trades that make me question my sanity, make me question what I know about fantasy football. Austin, how do you approach those trades? Are you someone who goes in sending those offers? Are you hoping to receive those offers? Are you as scared of those offers as me? How do you approach those trades in Dynasty startups?
Well, one just flag about me in general. Oh, Joel, I saw this coming from Joel, and I can't wait to talk about it. One thing to know about me in general around Dynasty, I struggle with trading in general because I seem to never be able to align how I value players with other people's value of those players and those picks. That's just a flag. I'm not typically pursuing trades in a Dynasty startup unless there is just some player that I need to get on my next pick and I am willing to just pay a premium to make sure that it happens. The caveat to that is that if someone offers me a trade, I'm always open and I'm going to consider it. And the way I tend to assess it is, do I feel like I'm going to be moving up or down a tier? And am I willing to sacrifice moving down a tier now or up a tier now for the opposite later on? So like I had the 106 in a startup draft recently, and someone offered me basically to move down to the 109. I was not willing to do that because I see the quarterback tier as a 6 or 7 quarterback tier. And by moving down to the 109, I was basically moving down a quarterback tier. And I didn't feel like I was going to move up enough in the future offers to legitimize that moving down in the first round. So that's how I assess it, is based on where I feel like the tiers lie. But sometimes it's just like you need to move up to get the player that you want. And if you're willing to give up some future picks, like go for it, like get your guys, because this is going to be the easiest time to get them. It's always going to be harder in the future to get those guys.
Joel, you can just continue on that topic.
Yeah, I think one thing you have to consider, especially in Superflex, is that the very top tier of quarterbacks, the Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, those guys, no matter how much you like them, they're still undervalued. So they should always be prime target. If you're at the back end of a draft, you should still be willing to kind of give whatever it takes to move up. If it takes, your second and, a fifth or something like that, plus your first, obviously, to get up into that. It's those guys give you such an advantage weekly, and they're all so young that they're going to be Dynasty superstars basically for years, much longer than the windows we should be looking to play in. Their value is basically immeasurable. So if you can go up to get one of those, and it's almost worth selling out to get a second one if you can, and just kind of dominate that tier. It just gives you such a massive advantage going forward that it's worth basically selling out in a startup to get at least one and possibly two of those guys.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't tell you the cost if you guys paid me to do so, but I remember in Club Fantasy's Dynasty startup, I did exactly that to walk out of the opening draft with Mahomes, and Joe Burrow because I wanted to make sure I was set. And our good friend Scott Fish did our Intro to Dynasty show 3 years ago. Josh will correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was 3 years ago. And he gave a piece of advice that I have never stopped thinking about since then in any of my Dynasty drafts is the draft, the startup draft or the rookie draft is the cheapest quarterbacks will ever be in Superflex. They will never be cheaper than in a draft scenario. So if you are going to get your quarterbacks, you get them through the draft. Otherwise, you are way overpaying. And we're going to stick with the quarterback topic for one last question, at least. And I'm sure we'll come back to quarterbacks because it's Superflex. But Joel, Austin, you made the pick. So I'm going to assume you think the answer is yes. So Joel, I guess this one's just for you. Is Patrick Mahomes still the 101 in Superflex? Is he the 101 Dynasty quarterback? Do you have a problem with Austin's pick with all these younger guys on the board? And I'm just going to throw him under the bus. Patrick Mahomes, absolutely my favorite player, him and Travis Kelce. However, they have no fucking wide receivers. We've talked about this. I'm getting nervous for the Kansas City Chiefs right now. Please go draft DeAndre Hopkins and make me look like a genius because I've been saying it. However, let's get back to the question. Joel, is Patrick Mahomes the 101 in Dynasty right now?
Yes, I thought he was last year when everybody was on Josh Allen. He was at Mahomes is still the unquestioned number one for me. Combining him with Andy Reid in that offense, they had no receivers last year, right? They had Travis Kelce and Juju Smith-Schuster and MVS, who is nobody's idea of a wide receiver one. And he was the number one quarterback. So he's unquestioned. I think he's almost on a tier by himself. You start seeing some, I think Sean McDermott said yesterday came out that they want Josh Allen to start taking fewer hits. We'll see when the rubber hits the road, if that's actually true, if he stops running as much as he is now. But, if he does that kind of saps a lot of his value as kind of the de facto goal line back there. Yeah. Mahomes is only 27. Right? It's not like he's old.
I said older and I immediately regretted it as the old man, which we're going to make fun of how old I am here in a second as well, but keep going.
Basically I don't think there's any question that he's the number one. He should be with or without a quote unquote number one receiver. He should be the number one.
Perfect. What I was joking is Scott Fish was with us last year. I said fucking 3 years ago. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. You see the gray in the beard. I'm getting up there. Speaking of number ones, Josh threw a wonderful comment in here, and he was even wrong. And I love calling Josh wrong. Bijan Robinson has not played a down, and he's the RB2 in this Dynasty draft. Josh, check your numbers. Oh no, my God, McCaffrey went one. I'm an idiot. Josh is right. I just was so anxious to call him wrong, and I'm the one who's wrong. So McCaffrey went ahead of Bijan Robinson. Well, let's get back to Josh's actual point as I look like a complete fool on our first show back. What else is new? Bijan Robinson is the number 2 running back in this Dynasty draft, and Josh's point is, my God, is the rookie 101 pick worth so much right now? And if you're brand new to Dynasty, after your startup draft, if rookies are not included, but then every year after that, you are typically going to have a 4 to 5 round draft where you are going to draft the incoming rookies. Josh is talking about firing me in the chat right now on my damn show. But anyway, you are going to draft the incoming rookies. And the rule of thumb with Superflex has always been QB first. Well, that rule got thrown out last year for Breece Hall over the just trash-ass quarterbacks that were coming out. This year, the quarterbacks are not trash, but Bijan Robinson is that damn good. And more importantly, the 101 is that damn valuable to get your hands on Bijan Robinson. I do not watch college football. All I've heard is how great this guy is. Austin, what is your take on number 1, Bijan Robinson? But I think more importantly, are you drafting Bijan or are you trading that 101?
Oh, I think it's an unquestionable you draft. Well, I don't know. It's not unquestionable. Here's the thing. When it comes to Dynasty, I am almost never a person that's like, you have to trade X person. What is best for your situation? If you have Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker and you had a bunch of injuries elsewhere and that's how you ended up with a 101, maybe you trade away and get a haul for a bunch of other picks. I'm just saying I can make a case. I can always make a case for a trade.
Austin,
and I'm willing
20
to
seconds
trade.
on the clock. All right, perfect.
Yes. What I will say though is Bijan Robinson is currently my Dynasty RB 101. Like
Ooh.
I've been updating my rankings over the past couple of days. He's my 101 right now. No question, no hang up about it. Feel very comfortable with that. And I don't blame people for just saying, yeah, I'm going to keep it simple. Take him at the top.
I can only assume my dog agrees with you. I don't know if you guys can hear her chiming in the background, but she's obviously a big Bijan Robinson girl. She just really wants to see him going this early in the draft, or she horribly disagrees. I don't speak dog. Joel, Bijan Robinson, and I guess very much it seems like he's the consensus. So let me ask you the question that Austin just kind of lent us. Is Bijan Robinson your dynasty number one running back ahead of McCaffrey, ahead of Jonathan Taylor? Is he the number one in dynasty? But I guess more importantly, if you are the owner of the 101, are you looking to move that and bringing in the King's ransom, or is getting Bijan on your team that important?
I will say I'm still kind of team Jonathan Taylor as the RB1, but I think he's definitely in that next group behind. If Breece Hall wasn't hurt, I think he would be kind of the consensus RB1. Bijan belongs with that group. There's no question. He's the best prospect coming out since Saquon Barkley. And, you know, we saw how Barkley turned out. There's almost no fail case for him. I will be a bit contrarian here. And I almost feel like, you know, I'm in a lot of leagues. Okay. I almost feel like the 102 is a more valuable pick this year than the 101, which is a bit of a paradox, but I think people want those quarterbacks so much, and the dynasty kind of community, royal we community, has kind of moved so far away from running backs that I feel like that 102, just getting your choice of the quarterbacks, is almost more valuable than the 101 itself. Yeah, I mean, you're not getting, if you want to trade that 101, you're not getting. I don't know that you can trade it for the 102 plus. I don't think that really happens. So you're probably talking a late first plus something else, a later not late first,
yeah.
Later first, like the 107, something like that. I don't know that you can get into the tier of the 2, 3, 4, where you can get the top of the quarterback tier, the Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson group. I don't know that you can get into that and get significantly more than that with the 101. Like, I'm in a league where I have the 102, and I've literally gotten offers from half the league for that 102. I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of leagues where I have the 101, but in the ones I do, I haven't gotten any offers for them at all. So I almost feel like the 102 is almost a more valuable pick this year than the 101.
It's almost that thing of like, he's not going to trade away Bijan Robinson. Why would I even make this offer? So maybe people are just intimidated at this point. So
yeah, but I think there's a special class of team that really wants Bijan Robinson, right? You need to be a kind of a contender. If you're not a contender and have the quarterback room, you'd rather be in that group where you're getting a quarterback. So I think it almost takes us. And like I said, the dynasty community itself has kind of moved away from running backs, almost to the point where we kind of need to pull back. So, pains me to say that as, King Zero RB guy.
Yeah.
I think we almost need to start looking into zigging when the rest of the community is zagging.
And that was where Zero RB was birthed from, was zigging when they're zagging. You take the value when it's in your face. And if they're going to start throwing the running back value at you, and actually when I get to Faith's draft here in a second, I think we're going to see that in action. I'm going to start kind of working through some of these drafts here. I'm not going to promise we're going to get to every team, but I'm going to do my best. So we're going to start with Zach at the 102. Austin, he's bookending you. So I want to ask you, has there been any snipes Zach has done? But when you look at his team, he took Josh Allen early. Was able to wait on quarterback and bring in Russell Wilson, who is, he's older, but I think he's only 34, 35, maybe not even that. He definitely has some years left if you're playing Dynasty in a 3-year window. Able to get Breece Hall towards the end of that round. And then the one that's very interesting to me is Saquon Barkley all the way in the 4th round. So I guess Austin has, what's your thoughts on Zach's team, and has he sniped you at all with you guys being right next to each other in the draft?
He has not sniped me yet, although somebody else in this draft has sniped me, and I am upset about it. But Overall, I feel good about Zach's draft. I think the fact there is value there on where he got Saquon Barkley. I do see why Barkley fell to the point that he did, given the fact that he's just a little bit older than a lot of the running backs that came before him. The Russell Wilson pick, I feel, is a bold move because you say he has several dynasty years left. He might not. Like, he's on the rocks this year. If he doesn't perform this year, I think Denver and Sean Payton are setting themselves up to be able to move away from him. And if he goes out like that from Denver, I don't know what team is going to be working really hard to get him on their team, to move him, to make a move for him. I think we could see Russell Wilson starting to fade to the background, the lower tier of quarterbacks, and maybe even just a perennial backup. Like, I know that might be an extreme take, but I think this is going to be a litmus test year for Russell Wilson, and I feel nervous taking him in a startup right now.
Yeah. Joel, anything to add to Zach's team, or I guess Russell Wilson?
I agree 100% with Austin on Russell Wilson. I have a couple leagues where I had him. I've traded him for the 112. I've traded him for the 24 first. If I can get any kind of first, I'm moving off him. The risk with him is so high, right? If he doesn't make it this year with Sean Payton, then all excuses are gone, and he's probably irrelevant, dynasty irrelevant. Basically, he's done as a dynasty quarterback. So, I'm trying to move off wherever I can. I don't want. I mean, we talked about this on our accountability show on the quarterbacks. He's a historic outlier size-wise for a quarterback, and outliers tend to burn bright and flame out fast. So I'm very comfortable moving off him wherever I can. If I can get a first, any kind of first, 24, 25, any, late first this year, he's out. I'm gone.
There you go. Faith, I think Joel was trying to win me and you over with her second pick, and it's probably a pick I would still make at this point in Dynasty as well, but he's a player that I have been, puzzled on what his value is in Dynasty. I let Josh absolutely rob me in a trade for Travis Kelce earlier this year because I have a team that's just floundering, and I thought I made a good move. And then I heard you guys talk about his value on Wednesday, and I did not get his value at all. But we'll talk about that in a second. Faith starts off with Jalen Hurts at the 103, back ends it with Travis Kelce, and then goes wide receiver deep. But more importantly, we talked about running back value falling. She gets Dameon Pierce, Dalvin Cook, and his brother James Cook back-to-back 8, 9, and 10, which I think is a really interesting way to start your draft, kind of what she's put on here. But more importantly, Joel, has she sniped you? You're at the 104. She's at the 103. How did you feel about the Travis Kelce pick, you and I both being immense Travis Kelce fans? And what is your take, and I'm going to get this from you as well, Austin, what is your take on Travis Kelce in Dynasty right now?
Yeah, I was always going to take a quarterback there in front of where she took Kelce, but I'm surprised he kind of lasted that long. I think the community has kind of moved up on him significantly. I think last year he was going kind of in the late third in startups. And you see now he's going 18 overall. And that's probably, I think he should go in the top 15 clearly, even in Superflex, just because the positional advantage is so significant. And I mentioned the other night that, elite tight ends, the great tight ends of all time, have historically played, there's no drop off in their early 30s. The drop off doesn't come until their mid to late 30s. And even then, they're still productive players. If you look at, his all-time contemporaries, the Tony Gonzalez's, Antonio Gates, Shannon Sharps, guys like that, they've played very well into, to 35, 36. And even, when they start to drop off, they're still putting up numbers that would be top 5 tight ends for where we are now, just because the tight end landscape is kind of so barren. Hopefully it's going to start improving here in the next couple of years. We got a theoretically good class coming in, and got another Kyle Pitts-like super talent in Brock Bowers in the 24 class. So hopefully things start to pick up here, but he's so far above the rest of the tight end landscape, even the Kyle Pittses and Mark Andrews, Dallas Goedert, TJ Hawkinson, even he's so far ahead of that group that he's worth, whatever. If you could take him in the first, he's worth it.
Yeah. So I've been jokingly telling people about my shameful trade. I'll throw it out there what it was. This team is in bad shape. I tried to buy into the playoffs last year, was unable to buy into the playoffs. And so I knew Josh was a contender. I knew Josh needed Travis Kelce to win a championship next year. And so I have this thing for George Pickens right now. I probably should have asked for a draft pick. Let me be clear. This was not a straight trade. I had just heard from Kate Majuk how Khalil Herbert was going to be a very good asset next year. So I traded Travis Kelce for Khalil Herbert, George Pickens, David Njoku, and Hunter Henry before the Mike Gesicki acquisition. It just feels disgusting and terrible now. We don't need to comment on how bad the trade is. Austin, before you talk about, Kelce or Kels in Dynasty, I do want to let everybody know I have this draft set up at 15 rounds. You probably just saw me scroll the screen. In a typical Dynasty draft, you are going to draft far longer than 15 rounds. You're going to probably go 25 rounds. And I forgot to warn my co-host at the beginning of the show. I am going to ask you guys who are some players you would be salivating for in the later rounds when this draft is over. So keep that in mind. We still have plenty of time left in the show, and the draft is actually flying. I very much appreciate everybody in the draft right now. But more importantly, back to you, Austin, after you make this pick, back to Travis Kelce. How do you feel? You see how I switched that up for you, my boy. But how do you feel about him in Dynasty? Should he be going earlier than where he just went? Does he still hold the value far more than what I got for him?
You got fleeced.
And the worst part is I offered the trade.
That was highway robbery.
I just want to, but here, that's what this show is about. I do this, and I screwed up really, really bad with my favorite player. Fantasy is mind-numbingly terrible sometimes. Austin, go. I'm sorry.
This was one of a couple of picks that Faith sniped me on. I was going to take Travis Kelce if he fell to me because, like you said, he is a league winner. The positional advantage at tight end is so large. If you have Travis Kelce on your team, you have to have him. You have to take him. He can take a subpar dynasty roster to the playoffs, to a championship. Last year, I took over a team, and my quarterbacks were Patrick Mahomes, which was great, and Kenny Pickett. That team got to the playoffs because of Travis Kelce. I had Kenneth Walker and David Montgomery were my primary running backs. I didn't need an elite second running back because of Travis Kelce. And so I think you get him, you enjoy him for the 3 to 5 year window that he gives you, and then you figure out your tight end situation later on down the road. You mentioned this year's tight end class, Joel, and I think this year is actually a great year to target some late round tight ends during a rookie draft because the class is so deep that we're going to see tight ends taken on day 2 and day 3 in the NFL draft. And if you look at where some of the elite tight ends in history have been drafted, it tends to be in that round 3 to 4 range. It's actually pretty rare that you see a round 1 tight end become the elite tight end that we come to know and love. And so I think this is a great year. If you have Travis Kelce on your team, just target some of those later tight end picks and do some dart throws. And I have some thoughts on who might be good targets for that. But I think, yes, take Travis Kelce, and then this is the year, if you have Travis Kelce, to kind of start taking some of those dart throws on some late round rookie tight ends.
Like that. Joel, right on the back end of you is, I think it's B. Jensen. Hopefully I'm not ruining anybody's name here. Started his draft off with, quarterback, Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott. There are questions about Dak Prescott, but we'll have time in the future to talk about Dak Prescott. However, another player he took, I feel, falls into a similar conversation as people, according to both of you, overreacting on Travis Kelce, and that is Cooper Kupp, coming off of an injury after being, easily one of the best players in fantasy football. He is 29 years old, coming off an injury, playing with a quarterback who may very well be dead at this point. We're not exactly sure. So the fact of the matter is Cooper Kupp a similar situation to Kelce? People are overreacting because I don't think a year ago Cooper Kupp was going in the 4th round of Dynasty.
No, last year he was kind of on the fringe, a fringe first rounder in right around the turn in Superflex. Yes, I agree with that. He is the community, I think, is overreacting to his age, just like Kelce. when healthy, he's an elite target getter, and that's what we want in fantasy in general, right? We want receivers who command targets. He had a historic season 2 years ago, 2 seasons ago now, and was on pace to kind of replicate that last year before he got hurt. The quarterback is a concern. I think, Matthew Stafford's got neck issues. He's had concussion issues. His wife has been active on social media, kind of lobbying for him to retire for a few years now. So that's concerning. And the fact that they don't have anything behind him is even more concerning. We'll see how they come out of the draft. But yeah, I still think he's an elite receiver. And yeah, I would have absolutely taken him there if B. Jensen hadn't, no question.
There you go. So a little bit of snipe action. Again, we talked a little bit about Mr. Mesik's team. He was the first one to go non-quarterback with Justin Jefferson, able to add Jonathan Taylor in the second round. I'm more interested in his quarterbacks, Austin, because he grabbed CJ Stroud, obviously an unknown rookie. You don't quite understand what's going to happen with him. Goes with Kirk Cousins. I don't know that there's Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott. There might be now more dynamic range of how people view these players in Dynasty and in football in general. And then comes back again with Will Levis, finally grabbing Jimmy Garoppolo in the late round. Very interesting quarterback room for Mr. Meeseeks. How comfortable are you with that quarterback room, Austin?
I feel pretty comfortable with it in the early stages. I have a little bit of issue with Kirk Cousins going before Daniel Jones, just because Daniel Jones just signed a long contract. He's a lot younger. But I think Kirk Cousins is one of those, we talk about it every year. He's not interesting. He's a boring quarterback. And so people don't want to take him, and his ADP always falls. He is consistent. He is one of the most consistent quarterbacks. He will get you 200 to 300 yards and 2 to 3 touchdowns per game on a dime. And he has the best receiver in the league to pass to. The thing about Kirk Cousins at this point is mostly his age. But if you were to look at his career stats and you ignore quarterback rushing, they're basically the same as Russell Wilson's stats. And Russell Wilson has been seen as a great elite quarterback for all this time. The only thing Russell Wilson does that Kirk Cousins doesn't is historically, he ran more. But Kirk Cousins, as far as a passing quarterback, I feel comfortable with it. Will Levis, we'll see. I'm not a pro scout, so I'm a little here and there on Will Levis personally. There may be something there, but Kirk Cousins and Dak Prescott, I'm good with.
I didn't even realize it was Tony. Tony's in the chat. Took Cousins to stack with JJ, unless that's not his team, but I think it is his team. So didn't even pay much attention to the stack there. We are coming to the end of the draft. I do want to kind of mention these last few teams just so we can talk a little bit about everyone's team. My big question with PB's team, Joel, is Javonte Williams. Not a lot of great news coming out of Denver on Javonte Williams. One of the phrases I heard is he'll never be the same again. And that is not words you want to hear about a fantasy running back. I'm not asking you for injury insight on Javonte Williams. How do we feel about the 8th round? Just rough guess looking at the draft board. It looks like he was probably the 13th, 14th, 15th running back off the board.
Yeah, I think that's a good price for him. I know you and I both liked him a lot last year, or heading into last year. Yeah, the injury is very concerning. When you have multiple ligaments like he did, that's always a concern. I think he kind of falls into the J.K. Dobbins class that we had last year, where he's probably going to start the year on the PUP list and may not be kind of fantasy relevant until the very end of the season. So if he's someone you can stash for, maybe like a playoff activation or something like that, I think it's a good thing. I don't think he's someone you can be kind of relying on to get you to the playoffs, though. Obviously, this is Dynasty. It's we're looking longer term than just next year. But if that takes away some of what made him dynamic, that's a very serious concern. And I've seen the same things where he says never be the same. If that's the case, then he's just another guy, and that's how much do you want to invest in that? And I think that's why. Like last year after the injury, the kind of the community advice was if you can get a first for him, take it. And that wasn't really there. I had a couple leagues where I had him and I couldn't get a first for him by himself. He had to, include him in other deals, a bigger package kind of to get the first value. So I'm very concerned. That's a good price, but I'm very concerned.
I say, yeah, the people who traded him are probably pretty damn happy right now. Benny Bestball was one of the few teams that waited later on quarterback, actually him and Mr. Meeseeks. Adds Deshaun Watson, obviously a questionable character. We're not going to get into his character. We're actually not even going to talk about him. I am more interested in talking about two players on Benny's team. I'm going to start with you, Austin. He grabs your boy, Trey Lance. I don't even know if Trey Lance is still your boy. We haven't done enough shows together this year. He grabs your boy, Trey Lance, as his QB2, back ends him with Kenny Pickett. I keep asking you about the QB rooms, but let's stick with it. How do you feel about this QB room?
It's tough. These are three quarterbacks that I'm like, I could go either way with them. Deshaun Watson, we know the deal there. He probably bounces back from a football perspective this year, if we're being honest. So yeah. I understand from a football perspective making that pick. Trey Lance, we don't know what the injury situation is. What we do know is that San Francisco has brought in Sam Darnold as the third quarterback in that room, and Brock Purdy is getting Tommy John surgery. Yeah. I love the upside of Trey Lance, and so having him in this particular quarterback room where you have two other quarterbacks, I feel comfortable with. I think the value on him is incredible. I think with the upside, if he ends up coming back and hitting, be incredible.
Yeah, Faith knows that you still love him. You guys swung a trade earlier this year. Austin, you know what, Austin? I'll let you talk a little bit longer since I've been throwing the quarterbacks at you. The other thing that this drafter did not touch running back until super late in the draft, which goes to what Joel was saying earlier, that the fantasy community is kind of off of running backs. So his only running backs, he went all rookies. His first running back not till the 10th round, Zach Charbonnet, Kendry Miller, Tajay Spears, and Zach Evans. Of this group, I like Charbonnet. I'm not sure how I feel about Kendry Miller. Tajay Spears, I actually like, or Tajay. I hope I'm not completely butchering that name. I'm still learning the rookies. I like him a lot. How do we feel about, and obviously there would be 10 more rounds left in this draft in real life. How do we feel about in the first 15 rounds walking out with only 4 rookies and not until the 10th round?
Yeah, I mean, that's a bold move, but I'm here for it. Like, this running back class is deep. And so waiting to get rookie running backs, I think makes sense. And I think one of the reasons why we've seen the dynasty community pivot away from running backs, they have 5 years of usable time, if that, right? Like, the thing with running backs now is as soon as they enter the NFL, they're playing for that second contract. And so youth at running back is key. And I haven't done all of the research on the running back class yet, but I know at least Tajay Spears, he was going to be one of my last 2 picks if he fell to me, because I really like the value there and think he has an opportunity to become a solid fantasy running back. So I like the strategy, and Sleeper has taken away the rest of the available players, so I can't tell you who else is available.
Oh,
but
no. Okay.
To your point, if we were continuing this draft on for another 10, 20 rounds, I can bet that there are some solid veteran running backs that you could get to hold down the fort while these other rookie running backs develop over time.
Yeah, I didn't realize they did that. I'm so pissed now because that was going to be our best segment of the whole show, was having you guys talk about other players. Joel, just moving over to S. Perez's team. David Montgomery and Alvin Kamara in the 10th and 11th round. Obviously, 2 years ago, these were probably top 3 round guys. A year ago, top 5 round guys. Their draft value, I guess, cuts in half. Alvin Kamara obviously has legal issues on top of everything else, but David Montgomery sliding into Detroit, possibly into that Jamal Williams role. Is this great value for late running backs as the 0 RB guy?
Yeah, for sure. I would, I'm kind of concerned about Kamara's being suspended, but you're still going to get him for probably 10 games. And like I said, with Javonte Williams, he'll probably be kind of a guy you can plug in around playoff time, and that should be really good value there. I'm kind of wondering if S. Perez is our Stacey Perez from our friends over at Fantasy and Frames.
Oh, very well could be.
So she's got McCaffrey and Eckler to start off, which is pretty absurd. And then she can go, with Montgomery and Kamara as kind of the backups. That's a really
Josh
a really good running back room.
Josh brings up a 22 pick difference between DeAndre Swift and David Montgomery is egregious. I think DeAndre Swift is an interesting player. And you know what? Kevin knows we're going to like his team. So we're going to skip Kevin's team before I have you guys talk about your draft strategies. So let's talk a little bit about DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift is, I had mentioned, guys like Kirk Cousins, who just really are divisive players in fantasy football. DeAndre Swift might be the most divisive player in fantasy football in the world right now, because we're pretty sure his own head coach hates him. So Austin, where are your takes on DeAndre Swift versus David Montgomery versus the field?
I mean, first off, we should know I'm pretty confident that DeAndre Swift pick was an auto pick. I don't even know Kevin meant to pick DeAndre Swift.
Okay.
So that makes this way more interesting. I am out on DeAndre Swift as an RB1. I don't think he has that upside. He is maybe a low-end RB2, maybe a flex with upside. But the thing with DeAndre Swift, I don't like to name players injury prone, but he has yet to play a full season all the way through healthy. That's a concern. 2, they don't like him in the red zone. They're like, forget that. We need a larger running back who is going to be able to power his way into the end zone when we get down there. And frankly, I see David Montgomery as an upgrade over Jamal Williams. I feel like DeAndre Swift now has more competition for running back touches than he had before. And
Josh is letting us know that Kevin did not auto pick that.
Oh, okay.
That is a legit value. So, here's what's funny. I didn't even realize Kevin took Swift. I'm looking at 3 different screens now while I'm hosting just to try to keep everything moving. So we get to talk about Kevin's team. And guess what? I guess we didn't like his team because we're about to talk bad about his DeAndre Swift pick. But Josh said it was not an auto pick. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The last thing I'll say is, unlike Jamal Williams, I think David Montgomery has more pass catch upside than Jamal Williams did. And so I think now this even threatens DeAndre Swift's role, which was the receiving running back. I love this move for David Montgomery because you all know I love David Montgomery. I think he's a great running back. And now he has an upgrade at offensive line. I think DeAndre Swift is on the rocks right now. And maybe this was a move to motivate him and get him to be better. But if I'm DeAndre Swift, I'm looking at David Montgomery and I'm thinking my job is on the line this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And we've heard that from quite a few folks that we think this could be almost a life-changing event for DeAndre Swift, Joel. So 22 picks between David Montgomery, who may put DeAndre Swift out of a job. What are your thoughts on that?
Getting back to what you said, I don't know that there's ever been a player in kind of recent Dynasty history who has taken a perceived value fall as much as DeAndre Swift did in the past year, basically.
Well, I would say almost a year to the date, because you could go back where people were talking about this guy as a first-round pick based on talent and draft capital and just everything. So.
And now you can't get a first-round pick for him, a first-round rookie pick for DeAndre Swift.
No,
it's just not happening. And I think you said it correctly. I don't know. I don't know that Dan Campbell hates him. But he's certainly not willing to give him, kind of a workhorse role. That's not going to happen. So and Dan Campbell's going to be there for a while. So DeAndre Swift is kind of what he is. He's a high efficiency, low touch guy, for the next couple of years. And, even if he gets, once he gets past his rookie contract, even if he goes somewhere else, at that point, he's 25, 26. He's in the kind of Dynasty community running back dead zone where nobody wants you anymore. So I think his kind of perceived value is taking a massive hit. I don't think he's ever going to have the value he had, like you said, a year ago. I will push back on Austin a little bit on David Montgomery being an upgrade over Jamal Williams. As a Packer fan, that makes no sense at all. Jamal Williams is the ultimate gamer.
Josh loves when we fight on this show.
And I took Jamal Williams in the 15th round, which I think is insane value. He's going to be, everyone's afraid of Alvin Kamara getting suspended. Well, who's going to have that job? Well, Alvin Kamara is out. Well, Jamal Williams.
Let's just talk about the value on your team. So we're going to recap the show now. So what I'm going to ask my two analysts to do is give me just a quick rundown of what their strategy was, how it worked out, if they needed to change. You don't need to talk about every player. You can see, he started, Joel started with two quarterbacks, Kyle Pitts, wide receiver, running back peppered in. So Joel, just talk a little bit about your strategy and talk about if you needed to change anything due to the draft or due to the value that fell on your lap.
So my strategy is always start with the scarce positions first and work around that. And the scarce positions are obviously quarterback and Superflex and tight end. So once I couldn't get Travis Kelce, I pivoted to Kyle Pitts. I think Mark Andrews going in the 5th is kind of ridiculous. That's I think I have them fairly close. Remember, Kyle Pitts was basically the most valuable non-quarterback dynasty asset at this time last year.
Yeah.
Obviously had a rough season, but the talent is still there. We're not high on Desmond Ridder, but there's going to be opportunities for better quarterback play there. I would have taken Kupp there, as I said. That would be a great topper to my wide receiver room. Not upset with London at all. Normally, and I think this is a kind of a dynasty versus redraft point. Normally, I would not want to have Kyle Pitts and Drake London on the same team in a redraft setting. In dynasty, I'm not going to worry about it. Right? There's too much going to happen, too much changes in the NFL. So I'm not worried about that. That'll kind of sort itself out, and I'll take talent and go from there. I like Jordan Love as my third quarterback. I think there's tremendous upside there. He's someone I liked as a prospect. As a Packer fan, obviously, I'm very high on him. I'm one of the very, very few people who liked him as a draft pick for the Packers back in 2020. Most of the Packer Twitter community just loudly shouts that they should have taken T. Higgins. I thought that was the correct pick. And then as someone who pivots away from running backs, I think getting Derrick Henry and J.K. Dobbins and Aaron Jones is and that's kind of the difference between a 10 team
Derrick Henry in the 8th
league.
round, bookended by Damian Pierce and Javonte Williams, is comical at this point. Like, that's absolutely insane. I want to ask you a quick question. You guys shared in one of our chats. We have so many damn chats at this point. There was a trade that you made to move up and get Jordan Love. Where you got him in this draft, did that coincide with where you moved up to get him in that draft, or did you learn a little bit about his ADP based on this mock?
Actually, in that draft, I traded down and took Jordan Love there anyway. But he's what I would have taken. So in this draft, he went 67 overall?
Yeah.
Or no, 64. It was 67.
67.
So I think that's a little low for where he's going.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm certainly happy to have him. I think kind of the community is kind of warming up to him that now that he's the unquestioned starter. And we talked about this in the group chat a little bit. I think he's kind of the perfect point guard quarterback for what LaFleur wants to run. I don't think we've seen LaFleur's offense under Aaron Rodgers. It's been more of an Aaron Rodgers offense. So I think Love is going to run that offense the way LaFleur wants it run. And so I think he's going to be very valuable. I don't know that he's not going to run enough to be kind of a cheat code quarterback, but I think he's going to be, as a second Superflex quarterback, I'm very happy with that. I obviously need someone to fill in for Kyler Murray while he's out, but a Herbert Murray Love quarterback room I'm very happy with.
And you had a rookie later on. I think you make an interesting point about Love in that, unlike some of these other like wayward quarterbacks, LaFleur drafted him. So the faith in the organization is there with he and Jordan Love. Austin, we're going to move over to your team. So we talked a little bit about your strategy from the end. You knew you were going to go 101. You knew you were going to take Patrick Mahomes, and you knew quarterbacks likely weren't going to be there for you. So talk a little bit about your strategy.
Yeah, in general, I try and attack dynasty startups differently based on the position. So like quarterback, I'm usually looking to get younger established guys. I'm rarely going to, reach for a young quarterback that hasn't proven himself yet. So as much as I like Trey Lance enough to trade for him in other scenarios, Faith, I don't know that I would draft him in a startup. And so you see, I did that
at least based
Mahomes.
on his ADP. if he fell,
right.
maybe.
If he fell at a certain point, there's always a point where I would just take the player. But for me, Mahomes and Daniel Jones, they've proven themselves enough that I'm like, yeah, as fantasy quarterbacks, those are going to be two guys to hold it down. Similar thing with receivers. I'm looking for kind of mid-age guys. I haven't done enough research on some of the younger receivers right now, but all of these receivers have proven themselves in some capacity. And so I feel like I have 6 receivers that all have top 25 upside. And some of them, like that's their floor, is top 20, top 25. So I feel comfortable with that. And then with running backs, I try and get a little younger. That's where I'm more willing to kind of bet on some players to break out because, like we mentioned earlier, running backs, sometimes their expiration date is way too soon. And so I am less interested in targeting the veteran running backs unless they fall to a certain point. Like Aaron Jones is a great example where he is falling so far in dynasty startups that I've been in right now. And I think it's gotten to a point where it's a bit egregious. So I'm willing to take.
Joel was able to land the Packers' best player in the 11th round of this draft. That's it.
Exactly. That's wild. And then if I don't get Travis Kelce, I'm probably waiting a long time to get my next tight end just because I don't feel certain that we're going to have that next tight end one, or at least who that next tight end one is going to be. I think Kyle Pitts obviously has a good case. As a Falcons fan, I'm pulling for him. Also, them signing Jonnu Smith, I think there's actually a good case that benefits Kyle Pitts because he can play more of that slot wide tight end role, whereas Jonnu Smith can be a more inline receiver, inline tight end. But I want to see it a little bit more. And as I'm trying to build a base, I think I'm going to try and target more players that I feel like have proven that they have the upside than not. The last player I would just hit on, KJ Osborne. It's my second to last pick. He's a wide receiver too in Minnesota now.
And young, right? 25 years old.
25 years old. And he has shown the upside. And teams have to deal with Justin Jefferson on the other side. So I love the value on KJ Osborne right now. The fact that I was able to get him as my wide receiver 6 is wild.
All right, I'm not going to have you guys pick a favorite team just because we ran a little over. I do have an oops of the draft, and I'm going to have 2 oops of the draft because you guys are not going to like the one I thought I was going to go with because you both have already defended this pick. The first oops of the draft was me admitting what I traded Travis Kelce for because I'm going to just get fucking destroyed for that. So I actually did not like, and this is hindsight being 2020, Joel's pick of Kyle Pitts in the 3rd round, only because Mark Andrews didn't go to the 5th round. So you actually talked about this yourself, Joel, because I'm like, wow, that tight end value is very strange. But more importantly for me and Joel, I know you would never have made this pick. I'm a huge Kenneth Walker guy. So to see Kenneth Walker and then even Tyreek Hill go after Kyle Pitts, those are two players that just really bother me. You two have already defended that pick. But Joel, because you're here, I'll give you a little bit more time to talk about Kyle Pitts before we end the show.
Yeah, I think the key for me is, like we said earlier, this is a guy who was, a year ago at this point was the most valuable non-quarterback in Dynasty. And the quarterback issues are real, but, if they do something, they were kind of rumored to be a Lamar Jackson landing spot. If Lamar Jackson goes to Atlanta, then Kyle Pitts' upside is immense. It's scary, immense. You would take someone considerably more talented or physically gifted, I'll say, than Mark Andrews and put him in that Mark Andrews role is kind of scary. That may be a bit of wish casting, but I still think he is so talented at such a scarce position that he's worth that pick easily.
And I think you're probably
looking at tight end value though. TJ Hawkinson, not going until after Mark Andrews. TJ Hawkinson is 25 years old. He's already had 2 seasons as a top 5 tight end in fantasy. So as much as I love Kyle Pitts and hope he pops off because please, we need something to root for in Atlanta.
Yeah, big Falcons fan.
If I end up with TJ Hawkinson, I don't feel too bad.
I was going to say, that's hindsight being 2020. That was really the point I was trying to make there. So, guys, we're going to get out of here. We were running a little bit over. Austin, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell them if you're working on anything right now.
Yeah, sure. You can find me at Austin_FFL on Twitter, and you can find all of my work at Club Dynasty, doing a lot of DFS content, and I'll be here every Monday to help you all prepare for your drafts.
Perfect. Joel?
At the Joel Wirth on Twitter. Like I said, the Club Fantasy Dynasty after party will be launching pretty quick. We're just kind of putting together the last minute kind of touches and advertising and promo and that kind of stuff. So that should be coming down the pipeline anytime now. Looking forward to it. We'll have a few articles dropping, Dynasty related, in the next week or so. Got about 4 articles I'm working on simultaneously. So they'll be coming out fairly soon once our esteemed editor gets through with them. So look for those on Club Fantasy.
Yeah, I look forward to it. We'll have rookie rankings popping soon. So guys, let me just give you a quick rundown of everything we do here at Club Fantasy. Every Wednesday we go live. Of course, we're about to have some non-live shows, but every Wednesday we go live with our show, No Punt Intended. We are about to start what we call our Stars of Tomorrow series, where we dig into the draft with people far smarter than us, because none of us really know these rookies. We actually just started our threads today as well. So make sure you're following us on Twitter at Club Fantasy FFL. This week from Sports Illustrated, we are going to have Chrissy Freud on the show with us to talk about the incoming quarterbacks. It's going to be a great show. We go off at 7 p.m. Eastern. We have our DFS golf show with Kelly and Adam every Tuesday. You really just need to subscribe to our channel because we have stuff coming out all the time. And then, of course, this show is going to be back every single Monday at 11. I put the draft link out on our Twitter handle at 9 o'clock in the morning. So if you want to join us, follow us on Twitter. You're going to see that draft link go out so you can play with us. Please, folks, follow us on Twitter. Follow us on YouTube. We need those subscriptions so we can keep bringing you guys this great content. We appreciate everybody who drafted with us. We appreciate everybody who tuned in. Always remember that defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. So we'll see you at the next mock draft. Thank you so much.